Recording. So welcome everybody to our first seasonal extended learning call. We usually host these from September until March when the weather gets nicer out and people are not indoors and freezing to death. So we're really happy tonight that we have Mandy Dendy from Protection and Advocacy and Johanna Johnson. Is that right? Yes, also from PNA that is joining us tonight to talk about supported decision making. I haven't been able to attend personally the supported decision making trainings that have been going on across the state. So Mandy was nice enough to agree to do an extended learning call. So for those that are not going to be able to see this tonight, we're going to record this so that they can look back on we'll put it up on our website with all of the materials as well. So thank you, Mandy and Johanna, for joining us tonight. And I'm just going to let you take it away. And then I'm going to go off of video, but I'm going to be here listening with intentness.
Thank you, Deneen. So as Deneen said, we've been doing this statewide, and Johanna and I have traveled, and it's really nice that we can do this one together without leaving our homes potentially. I don't know where Johanna is, but I'm in my home. And we were just talking before this started. We're over 600 people statewide who have heard about this now. We are reaching out to the special education community. So we hope that if you start talking about this with special educators that you work with, or we've had vocational rehab, that somebody knows what you're talking about. And if they don't, please feel free to send them to Protection and Advocacy's website. We have a lot of information on the website, including like a recording of a version of this presentation. So if somebody doesn't know what you're talking about, they can learn a little bit about it. And we hope to really speak to those of you. I heard somebody say that they have an 18-year-old. You are a perfect audience for us. If you don't have an 18-year-old yet, your kid's still 14, 16, you're also a perfect audience for us. I don't think either one of us would disagree that it's ever really too early to start talking to your kids about who's making decisions and what decisions are being made and how they're being made. And so tonight we're really gonna work on that with you, and I'm gonna get that presentation shared out so we can dig into it. By the way, I'm Mandy. I guess I never introduced myself. Joanna, you want to pop on and introduce yourself real quick too?
I'm Johanna Johnson. I'm in Region 1, which is Williston office, but as Mandy said, we've traveled throughout the state to present supported decision-making training.
Yeah, and I'm out of the Bismarck office. And so there's our names, and I'll just kick off with a real quick legal disclaimer. I work as a staff attorney in the Bismarck office, and both of us are going to be talking about slides that have laws on them, but we are not intending to give you any legal advice tonight. If you have like specific things that you'd like to talk about, we can't necessarily go into detail as to anything legal. So we're not intending to give you legal advice, and that's all I'm going to say. So we have 4 topics for you. Capacity, what is supported decision making? You'll see it's abbreviated SDM. It's a little easier to say, so you'll see that. And let's talk about it. And do I need it in writing? And if you have any questions throughout, we welcome those. We'd love to hear what you have to say. So feel free to raise your hand, and I'm hoping maybe Deneen can give us a hand if there are questions or something put in a chat. We'd love to address it as it comes up, or you can just wait and we'll hopefully have some time for questions at the end as well. Did I miss anything on that? Like, welcome, Johanna. Perfect. Then I'm going to kick it over to Johanna.
So we're going to talk about when it started in North Dakota. So supported decision-making is relatively new in all states, but in 2019, North Dakota put into law what people across the world have been using since the beginning of time, using trusted people to help with decision-making. How many of you have somebody that is your person that you know? Maybe if you know how they view certain things, you know who to ask, like what I should have for supper tonight or whether I should buy a new car. just different ideas. You know, you all have people that you may talk to, and they may be totally different on two ends of the spectrum for those two examples. Today, you'll learn more about supported decision-making and how it can be used in real life. It all begins with a discussion about decisions. So first, we're going to talk about capacity. Who can make decisions and what legal and mental capacity is. So the legal capacity, and this is a lot of legalized terms, and it's not to bore you, it's because we have to start somewhere. So Article 6 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights under the United Nations General Assembly back in 1948 states that everyone has the right to recognition. Everyone has the right to recognition everywhere as a person before the law. So everyone has rights to make decisions on their own if they have not been deemed incapacitated by a court of law. That means you have rights and you can do things with those rights as your own decision maker. People cannot be their own guardians. I know I've read some plans in the state where it said Mandy is her own guardian. Well, Mandy can't be your own guardian. Mandy can be your own legal decision maker. So mental capacity. Mental capacity is separate from legal. Mental capacity is a person's cognitive decision-making capability. Cognitive decision-making means identifying and choosing something using your values, beliefs, and preferences. So what affects mental capacity? Disability, age, illness, environment, and can be other external factors. It's often a moment in time. So capacity should never be treated as a fixed point. So you should look at the person at that time. Mandy and I have both taken wrong turns when we went to present supported decision making. At that moment, you might have said, Mandy and I have no capacity, but knowing us, you know, we're pretty well within the capability of getting somewhere. But if we use a map that gives us wrong directions, we may not look like we have the mental capacity to get to an important training. So lack of mental capacity in North Dakota, if a court, so court is the operative word. If a court finds a person lacks mental capacity or is incapacitated, it can order a guardianship for that person. So the term incapacitated means any adult who is impaired by reason of mental illness, mental deficiency, physical illness or disability, or chemical dependency to the extent that the person lacks the capacity to make or communicate responsible decisions concerning that person's matter of residence, education, medical treatment, legal affairs, vocation, finance, or other matters, or which incapacity endangers the person's health or safety. A lot of law. Guardianship is the legal relationship in which a court orders the appointment of a guardian to make decisions for another individual who is known as the ward. That's the person subject to guardianship. That means that someone else can legally make decisions for the person subject to the guardianship and is often referred to as substituted decision making. And this is not unlike the relationship of a parent and a minor child, where the parent has the ultimate decision making skills or abilities until the child reaches 18, which is the age of majority in North Dakota. So there's a difference between full and limited guardianship. Every court in North Dakota has the capability of deciding what areas a person has no capacity or some capacity to make decisions. They're different in every case, and they're explained in the court order and the guardianship letters. So North Dakota Courts Legal Self-Help page gives different options. It gives a less restrictive option to guardianship of an adult. The appointment of a guardian severely limits or completely removes the right of an adult to make their own personal decisions. Before petitioning for guardianship, consider other less restrictive options. Less restrictive options to guardianship of an adult include, but aren't limited to, the following: supported decision-making through PNA, or going through the Aging and Disability Resource Link. There's a power of attorney, healthcare directive, and representative payees as other options to guardianship. So guardianship and capacity. Guardianship is the legal finding of lack of mental capacity equals loss of legal capacity. That's in a nutshell what guardianship is. So a good example, and I'm sure people who watch the news or read magazines have seen Britney Spears. So there's a Free Britney movement. She's been making headlines for years because her father was her conservator, which is like a North Dakota guardianship and conservatorship. She did not have the ability to drive a car. She had to work. It put in the document that she had to do this for work. She couldn't drive a car. She had basically very limited rights, and those were all according to her father. Well, she gained the freedom to make her own decisions. And so this, unfortunately, Britney has now been able to make her own decisions. However, she's going to forever live under the microscope of the media and reporters, because everything she does wrong, and probably not everything she does right, is always going to be focused on by the media, because she didn't have the right for so long. So best interest versus expressed wishes. So guardianship or substitute decision making includes the best interest component. We as people usually want what's best for those we love. A guardian can decide for a person in guardianship what they believe is best. Supported decision making, on the other hand, is based on expressed wishes, like PNA. We believe in expressed wishes. This means that the individual decision maker decides what they want to do within their legal rights. So we give them the power to tell us what they would like. So we also need to talk about dignity of risk. We don't want people to get hurt. We don't want people to make the wrong decisions. So a lot of times best interest, we don't give the person a lot of dignity of risk, but we need to remember that we every day have that dignity of risk to make decisions. So dignity of risk refers to the legal right of every person to make choices and take risks in order to learn, grow, and have a better quality of life. That person that has the guardianship or looking at a guardianship will never know if they can do it if they don't get to try. We've all tried and failed, yet we try again. It's human nature to want to protect somebody, but when does that protection impede on their right? So overprotecting somebody, there's a fine line between recognizing and planning for risk and avoiding risk altogether. If we never let somebody have that dignity of risk, we're basically putting them in a bubble and never letting them try for themselves or make a decision for themselves. So we need to make sure we're not overprotecting the person unnecessarily. Each person has the right to make decisions for themselves within their capacity to do so. So changing the what ifs and find out what matters. What if their decision and what they want to explore goes right? You want to embrace the creativity that they bring to the table. Understand where they're coming from and give them that capacity. So strength-based and solution-focused. Don't make assumptions about someone's capacity to grow and change. Don't be so fixed on the mindset that no growth can ever be happening. It's just how it happens. We've used guardianship for years. That's the best way it's going to be. Try to give them a chance. Seek risk as an enabler, not a barrier. Mandy has done this several times with her teenage kids this year, since we started examining supported decision-making on a statewide basis. So if you never give somebody opportunity, you don't know what they're going to be able to be capable of. Explore it with the individual and from their point of view. Think about reducing risks versus supporting the person in managing risks. Positive risk taking. Focus on their strengths. Not everybody can maybe make the same decisions all the time, but if you know that they have a strength, let's say I don't know, some people are frugal. Let's say they have a money thing that they don't like to spend money. Well, why not let them figure out how long, if they want something, why not give them the opportunity to see if they can figure out how long it would take to save that money to get whatever they're trying to strive for. That's being a positive risk. Look at the person, look at their strengths, and go from there. Recognize their potential risks and benefits in decision-making. Identify potential benefits, harms, and impacts of them making the decision. So what are the risks in positive risk-taking? Risk can be beneficial. It can balance necessary protection with reasonable levels of choice and control. Necessary protection should be justified based on mental capacity, effectiveness, and proportionality. Proportionate to the risk identified and potential impact. Ensure ongoing monitoring and review for appropriateness. You guys are the best people to be in the position because you're allowing them to do this with your support, rather than a court taking all their abilities and putting it as a nope, they don't have any capability in this area. So capacity and supported decision-making, or SDM, capacity comes when it comes to decision-making. It's not an all or nothing. A person may be capable of making some decisions, but not others, making some decisions that sometimes are, but not others, or making decisions only if they get understanding of what they're trying to do, consent to, what decision they're trying to come to. So what I wanted you to take away from topic 1, mental capacity is your ability to think and make decisions. Legal capacity is your right to make those decisions as defined by a court. Capacity is fluid, it changes. Capacity should be assessed on a decision-by-decision basis. Incapacity to make one decision does not mean incapacity to make others. An individual should never be presumed incapable. Capacity can change over time and can vary according to supports provided. Capacity is the root of everybody's decision-making skills.
And so now we are on to topic 2, and I want you to kind of think about everything Johanna just told you in relation to if your kid's on an IEP or they have some kind of plan, behavior plan, whatever that is, you're kind of thinking about it. Maybe your kid was struggling with something, and then in the IEP, you're building that skill. And so how are we building it? What supports are we providing? It's the same kind of thing as we think about what Johanna just talked about with capacity. Sure, not every teenager might be really great with money decisions. In fact, in my experience, none of my teenagers, well, I take that back. One of my teenagers is pretty good with money decisions. But my older one is by far a poorer person to make money decisions right now, but that doesn't mean that she always will be. I mean, so kind of keep in mind that what kind of supports we're providing each kid and how it looks, just like an IEP, is individualized to each kid. Some kids might need more support in certain areas and some kids might not. And so that's what we look at in supported decision-making. There's 3 pieces and it all revolves around, for you, the audience here, it's going to be your child, the individual decision maker, or your child who's now a young adult. And so then we're going to look at, well, okay, so they're the decision maker. Who's going to help them? That's the supporter. And the supporter is just that, a helper. And then you come to an agreement. And that's what the support looks like, who's doing it, how, all that fun stuff. So those are your basic 3 parts. And in law, in North Dakota Century Code, supported decision-making has its own chapter, even though we talk a lot about guardianship. They are 2 separate chapters in the law right now. So you can go, it's like a couple pages worth of laws on supported decision-making. And this tells you what it means. So a supporter can do any or all of these bulleted items. It can be as simple as your child saying, I'd like somebody to help me get some of these documents pulled together. I'm going to decide where I'm going to college, and I'd really like some help getting all my transcripts and whatever all I need. I'd like some help with that. So that could be the only thing they ask a supporter to do. Or they could have a supporter to help them gather documents and explain it to them. So a supporter could help explain documents, or the supporter could just explain the documents. Maybe your child can gather their own documents and they don't need help with that part of it. A supporter could also help identify choices. So what's going to happen if you go this direction? What are the advantages and disadvantages? What are all your available choices? And help them kind of look at that part of the decision-making process. Or the supporter could tell other people about a decision they've made. So the supporter's not making the decision, but maybe they're going along and explaining that decision on behalf of the individual decision maker. And finally, supporters can go to court. So if there is a proceeding in court to establish a guardianship or a conservatorship, which guardianship is separate from conservatorship in North Dakota. Conservatorship is just for financial in North Dakota, but those definitions vary depending where you are and what state and their laws. So they can go to court and say, hey, judge, you ever heard of supported decision-making? Here's what a supporter does. And that can be done with new guardianships. It can be done at guardianship review hearings in the future. So that's a door that's open to supporters. And so that individual decision maker, I think we've probably already covered that, but just to be really clear, that is the person who is making decisions and in supported decision making is asking for help. And what that help looks like, that's up to the individual. So they are the architect, they are designing it. Number one, do I want help? If I want help, what kind of decisions do I want help with? I feel like I'm pretty good with financial, but maybe I enjoy somebody coming to the doctor with me and going to some of my therapy appointments or whatever that is. Maybe I want some help with my medical decisions. But how much help do I want? Do I want my supporter to go to all of my doctor's appointments? Do I just want them to go to some? Do I not want them to go to any? Maybe I just want them to help explain stuff to me and have access to my online chart so that we can go through stuff together and I understand what's going on. So they really they design the whole thing. Unlike IEPs where everyone's there's a lot of voices in the room. This is the decision maker is the voice and they are leading that. Whatever their plan looks like, that's their plan. And so it's really flexible for this decision maker. They can have more than one agreement with different supporters for the same decision or for different decisions. My favorite example of how this could look, and just really simplifying it here, is if I say, where should I want to get ice cream after this call is done. And so I need some help from everyone on the call. I'd like to enter into an SDM agreement with each of you, but I have 3 pieces that decision. Number one, where should I go for ice cream? Dairy Queen or, TCBY, where should I go? Number 2, how much, help me with my budgeting. Like, can I afford to go somewhere, get extra scoops of ice cream, or where's my budget sitting? And 3rd, how should I get there? Should I see if there's a scooter I can rent, or like, should I walk or take my bike, or, how am I going to get there? So 3 pieces to that decision. And so I could enter into agreement with everyone on the call right now and ask you all to give me those 3 pieces of help on the same decision. And everyone could give me super awesome advice. It could be spot on, and I don't have to listen to any of you. As that decision maker, it's my choice. I could listen to one of you, or I could listen to part of one and part of the other, or I can just say, I don't know, and just walk out and ask one of my kids in the living room. and say, where should I go get ice cream? I'm super hungry for ice cream. Should I go to the grocery store? And I don't have to listen to them either. Like, it's ultimately my decision. So I can ask anyone, I can choose to take the advice, I can choose not to take the advice. And there's no legally binding relationship. Nobody can come back to me and go, you know what, Mandy, I gave you some really good advice there. Why didn't you listen to it? That was not a smart thing to do. And it doesn't matter. That was my choice. And that's the way it's designed to be in supported decision making. It gives me all these tools to use, and I get to choose if I want to use them and how. And so if your child has an uncommon method of communication, so maybe they use a sight board or Braille or sign language, or, you know, however they communicate, the important thing is if they can communicate a decision that they've made, if they can make a decision, then they can enter into a supported decision-making agreement. And so here we get to, I think, well, juicier parts here is what is a supporter? And I like to focus on this. A supporter is a helper. In law, they're a person who signs that agreement and they agree to provide assistance to the person asking for help, that individual decision maker. The supporter has no authority to make decisions or sign documents on behalf of the individual decision maker. So they're simply a helper. The best way I can think of to describe it is you're walking into a room and you're saying, how can I help? What do you need from me? And then you're just stopping and listening. You're not saying, well, I think you should do this, or, you know, I would do this, or it's really just about listening to the person you're helping and what they want. And so that supported decision-making agreement, that's the third part of it. And that's your chance to put it in writing. So it's very clear who the decision maker is, who the supporter is, what kind of help is being offered. And it's to support the person, and they can break it down into categories such as, you'll notice these are the same basic categories as you'll see in guardianship, healthcare, residence, finances, education, your legal affairs, vocation, like where you work and stuff. And so it's usually under law, in order to be recognized, it's written, signed, dated, and witnessed or notarized. And so if you choose to have a supported decision-making agreement, it cannot be used as evidence of incapacity or incompetence. So all that stuff that Johanna went over about incapacity, North Dakota law presumes that everyone has the capacity to enter into an SDM agreement, that we're all capable of making our own decisions. And that presumption can only be rebutted, that legal term, meaning that somebody has to prove otherwise. So you say, I got an SDM agreement. Somebody says, you can't have an SDM agreement. You say, says who? And this says who needs to be somebody pretty important to override that. A doctor that says you don't have capacity, or a judge that says you don't have capacity. It has to be pretty significant to overcome that basic presumption that once we all turn 18, we have all these legal rights and we get to use them and we get to do stuff. We get to vote, we get to get married, we get to get a job, any job we want, go to school, whatever that looks like. And so there's a reason we talked a lot about guardianship, because supported decision-making is an alternative. So it's a less restrictive alternative. If we're coming back to that IEP kind of thought, and you're looking at what's my child's least restrictive environment, guardianship, a full guardianship, as Johanna described, is your most restrictive environment for your child as they go into adulthood. So limited guardianship would be a less restrictive alternative. And then there's a whole bunch of other things that Johanna kind of touched on there as to what could happen before we have to get to guardianship. So when courts look at whether guardianship is necessary, they are supposed to look at that whole, whatever else happens in the least restrictive, what else can we do? Is there another way to do this? Is there another plan? Can we have a power of attorney or representative payee? Or it could be for somebody with financial, maybe it's just having auto bill pay and something to help them with stuff like that. So the court's going to look at that, and you won't see supported decision-making in the guardianship laws, but it absolutely is an alternative resource plan. So it's satisfies.
So Mandy,
yep.
There is a question, and I know we'll get to it later, but you said They can
Yeah,
ask at any time.
absolutely.
So Sandy would like to know, what is the benefit of getting the agreement made?
Yeah, so Sandy, you are not the first person to ask me this in the last few weeks. I just got this. Actually, I presented at the North Dakota, I'm gonna butcher their name. It's like the Transition Practice of Community. DPI coordinates it, right? And so there was an educator in the room, and she looked at me and she said, I just don't get it. Like, what is the advantage here? And so I thought about it for a second. And the best way I've thought to describe this, because I've thought about it a lot since, is this sets up lanes for people. So what we see, and I think I hope Johanna would agree, what we sometimes see in our work is people with disabilities, whether or not they may have a lack of capacity, sometimes that can be perceived. Because there's a disability, sometimes people, they really want to help the person. They think that maybe they're not capable of doing something on their own. And that disability gives the impression that they need extra help, right? And some people do, and that's very valid. And some people don't, and other people just might really be wanting to help. And sometimes that help goes a little too far to where it's depriving them of their dignity of risk or their ability to make all the decisions that they can make on their own. Sometimes it just creeps a little too far. And so the beauty that I see in supported decision making is it gives that decision maker the ability to say, you know what, I'm making all my own financial decisions, except for this little part I just want help with. And so if I just want help talking to the people at the bank, because that's intimidating for me or whatever, then my supporter knows that that's all I'm asking for help with. I'm not asking them to get access to my bank account and, you know, watch every dollar that I spend, because as a parent, you can have access to your child's online banking account and you can look at everywhere they're swiping their debit card. But you know, as to whether you comment on that or whether you're advising them on how they spend that money in a true supported decision-making agreement, if you have access to that when your child is older, if they've given you access to that, it should be very clear to whoever is supporting them as to what you're going to do with that information. They've allowed you to have access to the information. Maybe they've only asked you to do that for a certain purpose. So it's very clear then how you're supposed to help them. And that's all the help they want. And if they want more, then they'll ask for it. So that's value I see. Johanna, do you have any value that you see in it that's different or extra?
I think the way you explained it is perfect. I think that if we label and we just slap a label on somebody, they go to the doctor and you have arthritis. Well, now you want to get a cane? No, we want to give that person the opportunity to get better, or, you know, not label them as, oh, now they need an accessible parking or their handicap permit. You don't, you know, you want to give them and build them up so they can feel capable that they can do something. Even if guardianship is the only option, having a person use supported decision making along with guardianship, that's huge. And we're not saying that guardianship is not a good way to go if a person needs it. We just think we want to get supported decision making incorporated into a lot of different things, so then people can, you know, feel good about themselves and boast because they actually got to help make a decision where somebody's made a decision all their life.
Yeah, and that's a perfect point, because I also see the value of supported decision making. Having it as an option is just like an IEP should be tailored to what is best for a child. So should the supports. So whether that's a full guardianship or a limited guardianship with supported decision making, or maybe you start with supported decision making and see how that goes. And then, you know, maybe it needs to be adjusted, or maybe you need to look at a limited guardianship for certain areas where the person's struggling with decision making, and that's okay. It should be tailored to what they need. So yeah, that's great.
Okay.
And so there are advantages if you choose supported decision making instead of guardianship, maybe as a starting point. Because when you go to the guardianship route, it is, as Johanna explained, a legal relationship. So only a court can change it. Whereas supported decision-making, the person making decisions can change it, can end that agreement super easy. The person supporting can also end the agreement, and it can be done without telling. It's only between those two people. And so also the person making decisions can have multiple supporters. So if somebody in their life or that they know is really good with finances, maybe they ask that person for financial help. Maybe somebody else is really good with medical stuff. And so it gives them a lot of flexibility as to who else all in my life, what are their strengths? Can I use those to help me in areas that maybe I need a little extra support in? And so we see, we've already kind of hinted to this, it can fit with the natural supports in your life, looking at who's there, and then the people that are in your life, when you're looking at who makes decisions and how, just try to be mindful of, as Johanna has so eloquently stated, just really always err on the side that this person should be able to make this decision unless we've tried everything and then we just realize that it's not possible. So we always kind of start at that place with what else can we do? What supports can we add? What can we change? And then be willing to kind of try again. And if you come to that absolute conclusion that it's not going to work and there isn't capacity in that area, then you have those tools, the guardianship, restrict or limited or full guardianship to use. And so it also fits with guardianship. Guardians in North Dakota law are supposed to involve the person subject to guardianship as fully as possible in making decisions, especially those important decisions, where they live, their health care, working, those kind of decisions. Definitely want that person in the guardianship to already be helping to make those decisions. And so SDM is a way for that to work. And so here we get to where that tailoring, here's some areas to maybe help you if you're thinking about your child and what kind of decisions they're making and, you know, where you see the strengths and areas to build on. Ask yourself, does your child understand information related to decisions or a particular decision? Can they retain, can they hold on to that information? Can they use and weigh it? So can they, if you're talking to them about where they're going to go to school or, you know, something like that, can they do pros and cons and say, well, if I do this, this might happen. And if I do this, this might happen. Can they communicate? Are they able to tell you when they've made a decision, and is it clear? So if you're getting no's to some of those questions, it may indicate a lack of capacity. So then you look at, okay, what areas might there be a lack of capacity? And if there isn't a lack of capacity, then if you're looking at restricting that decision making, if you're looking at guardianship, then it doesn't belong under the guardianship. If the person, the example I have here is if they can make their own employment decisions, where they work and all that kind of stuff, then don't, make sure when you're going through guardianship paperwork that that box should not be checked. They should be allowed to make their own employment decisions. So just looking, kind of tailoring that to the individual's strengths and their areas to build on. And hopefully we're seeing this as a process. It's my greatest hope that in special education, you are seeing your child growing in their ability to self-determine their future and what's going to happen, and that you're seeing your child invited to IEP meetings, and that you're assisting with or participating in the team and empowering your child to come to these meetings and maybe speak up and maybe even someday kind of lead the meetings, talking about what their goals are and how they're going to reach them. And so the goals should really be your child's. That's true self-determination. And so the question is, how can we continue to encourage and build on those decision-making skills, whether it's part of the IEP or your child's, you know, coming out of school now and you're looking at, well, maybe they still need a little support, or how can I still assist them in becoming a better decision maker? And knowing that I don't think teenage brains actually finish growing in their teenage years, or at least some of them do not. So then we got to kind of, and this is a question we don't have the answer to. It's just a question to think about. Is it okay to let go? If so, how much? Definitely questions to think about and kind of keep in the back of your mind. And so your takeaways is 3 parts in law: individual, supporter, and agreement. And it can be used with guardianship. It can be used as an alternative to guardianship, and it can be used to help build decision-making capacity. And then I'm going to turn it back over to Johanna.
So now we're going to talk about it. We've talked a lot about it, but we're going to talk more about it. So what you need to do is think and talk about your choices with your child or the person that you're wanting to help. This may take time and repeated conversations. The most important thing is be patient and listen. Really listen to what they're saying. So some questions to ask, and you may already know the answers. What kind of choices have you made? What choice do you want to talk about today? Or is there a decision that you want to try to figure out a solution to? Who made the choice? Did you make it by yourself, or did someone help you? Did a teacher help you? Did your mom help you if you're talking to your dad, or your dad if you're talking to your mom? Or did the mailman help them make their decision? It doesn't matter who they ask. It's just finding out who those people are. How did you make the choice? What did you like or not like about making the choice? Maybe it was because they had to ask somebody that they really never thought they would ask, or they felt obligated to ask mom and dad because they're the people that's always with them. And can you think of anything that would have helped them make the choice better? It might be just simply of, did they have enough time? So using supported decision-making to build capacity. Start small. Don't say, where are you going to college? We got to make that decision tonight. Say, okay, what can we start with within their realm that we think that they can help? Talk with them about the decisions they'd like to make and choose one to start with. Let them choose. If they can't come up with something, you choose. Practice supported decision-making. Ask the individual if there's anything they'd like, that they need to make a decision. How much time do they need? Do they need help telling others about the decision? It may be, I take Mandy to my doctor's appointment because I think I'll forget something important that I have discussed with her. So that's something that she could go help me practice. Or we could have a conversation and we could role play. Ask the individual if they want anyone to help them make the decision. Identify who those people are. It may not be you. And talk with supporters about their roles. So there is a really great website, supporteddecisionmaking.org. It has a brainstorming guide, and I went out there and used it. And, you know, sometimes you go out and you go, oh, there's this really great website, but then you can't figure it out. I think this one is actually good, that you can actually use. User-friendly, and it gives you options. P&A, mainly Mandy, has developed a worksheet to help individual decision makers work through what kinds of decisions they want to make and how they want to make those decisions. That's out on the P&A website. And supported decision making agreements are not intended to be permanent, which is nice, because you don't have to go to court to get it changed or get it revoked or get it whatever. And what do we do every day? Trial and error. It's okay. We live and we learn. We try. If we want to try it again, we try it again. And no decision is too big or too small. It may be, does Mandy want ice cream? Should she have ice cream? That wasn't the question. How does she want to do the ice cream? How much money does she have to spend? How is she going to get there? So identifying supporters. When we first started this process, the advocates and the attorney had a differing view. And I know that we've enlightened Mandy a lot, because everybody has people, right? No, not everybody we work with has those people. Most of the time it's the parents. If they have good role models, they know to go ask mom and dad, or that's just their natural support. But some people don't have that option. So supported decision-making is a choice about the choice of the individual, and they alone get to ask who they want to be a supporter. Supporters can choose not to be a supporter when asked, or they may move, get sick, or pass on. So there's a lot of things to look at when becoming a supporter and maintaining the supporter role. So keeping these things in mind helps set up the individual for success. Individuals may not have readily identified supporters or a robust support network. Sometimes we have to brainstorm. It might be, let's say, your parents, the person's parents. Well, they have really good best friends that, let's say one's a banker. Oh, that guy can help me. So you may be surprised who the person comes up with as their potential supporters, but it might be people that you have as everyday worked into their trust network. One thing you need to ask is, who do you trust? Whose opinions do you want? The big one, who can you say no to? Because you don't want them to not be able to say no. And who actually listens to you on a regular basis? And who is easy to talk to? So there's another worksheet out there that may help identify potential supporters. So supporting supporters may be persons who have had or have substitute decision-making capacity. Guardians are persons who have informally acted as the individual's guardian for the individual decision maker. So what we do is we flip the model upside down, and it requires the supporter to de-invest themselves in the decision of the individual. It's repositioning, giving them the empowerment and capacity to make those decisions on their own, knowing there's some risk, and still supporting that person in making that decision. So supporters should be good listeners and able to understand an individual's values and preferences and put their own aside, able to gather and understand information, able to follow directions without judgment and put aside their own values and beliefs, be able to assist even when decisions seem risky or unwise, using the dignity of risk, and able to communicate decisions clearly on the behalf of the individual. If I take Mandy to a doctor's appointment, I want her to be able to tell the doctor what I talked about. Remember, Mandy can't make a decision for me because I took her to the doctor's appointment. That's on me. Supporters can only be there to support. They can't make decisions. So it's important to know the individual. Knowledge of the individual and their abilities and disabilities is fundamental. Think about, how does the individual communicate best? Do they need time? Do they need something to read? Do they need you to take notes to then go over it at home so they fully understand what they're making the decision about? What kind of information is meaningful? Consider alternative formats. Do they need to watch a video on a possible procedure that the doctor told them that they should get in order to decide if they want that procedure? What's the person's understanding of the decision? Ask them, what did we just talk about, to make sure they're understanding? And ask if there's anything else they want to know, how much time they want to take to make the decision, and if there's someone else they would like to talk to about the decision. Consider using assistive technology just as an option to help them with the process. So support is individualized. Every person, it looks different. Mandy wants ice cream. I may want to find a chocolate store. So just because we have sweet tooth doesn't mean our decisions are going to be the same. Support asked for and given will look different for every individual. So remember, the supporter is not deciding anything. The supporter shouldn't have any skin in the game. It's all about voluntariness. So it's important to define roles and responsibilities, the who's, the what's, the how's, the why's, and determine whether supported decision-making is used formally or informally. A lot of us have used it informally since we were children. We have the individual decision maker, the supporter, and the agreement parameters. What kind of areas are to be supported, what the support look like, and how is the agreement going to be terminated? So some practical considerations. I'm not going to go into this website because we will be sending out this PowerPoint, and that practical tool in the blue up on top, you can click on it. It's pretty awesome. It talks about different things. Let's presume guardianship is not needed. Reason, we need to clearly identify the reason for concern. That gives you a step-by-step process in order for you to fully look at different decisions. And is supported decision making going to work? Possibility, what's going to happen? So some conversation takeaways from part 3. Be decision focused, not goal oriented. Focus on the decision-making process, not the outcome. The process, not the outcome, because try and try again. They may fail, they may succeed. You never know. Use open-ended questions. Make sure your words aren't in any way limiting what kind of decisions is or are in the table. Like Mandy, where do you want to go get at Dairy Queen? I'm limiting that she has to go to Dairy Queen. She wanted to go to TCBY. She wanted to go to the Orange
Grocery
Leaf.
store. Yeah.
Exactly. Or to the freezer because her husband bought her ice cream and she didn't know about it. Don't assume that you know what they want. That's just like saying, well, you're not happy with your roommate and you live in an apartment. Where do you want your apartment to be? Well, that's assuming that she still wants to live in an apartment. It's all about the individual decision maker and what they decide about which areas, who's going to support them, what kind of supports they're going to give, and how they're going to get the support. There's no magic formula. We've learned in this throughout our lives. It takes time, effort, patience, and willingness to keep on trying. And now I'm going to turn it back to Mandy for our final.
And I'm going to gloss through this one. You're going to get the PowerPoint presentation, and this is the driest portion of the presentation anyway. But when we talked about informally and formally, absolutely, like Johanna said, I use Johanna as my supporter sometimes, and she uses me as her supporter sometimes, and we don't put it in writing. We help each other and I try not to step on Johanna's toes because I have done that once. And so this is really good practice for me to be an effective supporter and remind me where my lane is. And so the benefits of putting that in writing, if we were to make a big decision, I were to ask for her help with a big decision or she vice versa, the benefits of that is it makes those lanes really clear. So when you put it in writing, it's really clear whose job is what and all that, right? And when it's in writing as well, we can show it to other people. So if I'm asking Johanna to help me with coming to the doctor, we can show the doctor that Johanna is my supporter and what her job is as my supporter. So there's also protections for information. If they're gathering information, the decision maker still has to sign appropriate authorizations in addition to the supported decision-making agreement. And that's just to protect their information. We don't want anyone having access to confidential information or misusing it. So in law, there's also protections that supporters have to keep that information confidential, and they can only do with it what the decision maker has asked. And so if you're a supporter, you're generally protected as long as you think you're doing the right thing. You've read the agreement, you've talked to the individual, you're clear in what you're supposed to be doing. As long as you're doing that and you're not being reckless, grossly negligent, or just flat out doing things aren't right, then you're generally going to be okay. And as far as we know, we haven't heard of anyone getting in trouble with this. And there's same kind of protections for if you're giving it to a banker or a medical professional, they should honor that agreement and they should follow it unless they think that the named individual is being abused, neglected, or exploited by the supporter, or unless they know or should know that that agreement's no good anymore. And same with like releases for information. So these third parties should give the documents they're supposed to give, and they should follow the express wishes to stay on the right track there. And so there is your confidential information. Requirements are that it must be notarized, 1 notary public or 2 witnesses. They're the qualifications to be a witness. You have to be an adult. And in case we haven't made it clear here, you also have to be an adult to enter into a supported decision-making agreement. That doesn't mean you can't talk to your kids about it if they're not 18 yet. We both are big fans of talking earlier. The earlier, the better, the more frequent, the better. practicing it, using it informally. Nothing says that you can't use it informally with a kid that's under 18. So absolutely. If you want to enter into an agreement, your child wants to enter into an agreement, we have something on our website, and I've sent out that guide. There's also a template in the guide, but the template's on our website. If you want to use it, you can. You don't have to. It's not required. And you don't have to give it to anyone. And it might be a really good occasion to celebrate, especially thinking of, I think of kids. I just had one turn 18 in June, and she embraced her adulthood with both arms and like just every part of her body, embraced her decision-making ability. And she's making all kinds of decisions. And I'll be honest, I do not agree with a lot of them. I think a lot of them are very risky. And so I'm really working at like celebrating her making these decisions, taking these risks, and supporting her where she's asking me to. And it's really hard not to say stuff sometimes. So I'm just really, if maybe, I don't know, I see this SDM agreement as physical proof of a young person's ability to make decisions, to drive the bus, if you will, like Pigeon Drive the Bus books. This is their driver's license. This is their, I'm making the decisions, especially if they've been in special ed and people have been planning things for them their whole, going through school. When they get to be an adult, even if it's not like a full, if it's just SDM for certain, like that's proof that they're in charge and they're making those decisions. So I think it's a celebratory occasion. And so that gives you a quick rundown on this part. Certainly we'll provide you with the whole thing so you can review it and read it. But I do want to touch on this in our last less than 60 seconds. When I told you it's easy to end or modify, for your decision maker, they can say it verbally. I don't want to support a decision-making agreement. You're fired. Let's end this, whatever that looks like. I quit. They can use assistive technology. They can scrumple it up, throw it in the trash, start it on fire, put it in a mud puddle, whatever that looks like, tear it into 1,000 pieces. They can also put it in writing. They can put it in the agreement. I just want your help until this event happens, or I just want your help for a year or 6 months or 2 months, whatever that looks like. The individual and the supporter can put that in the agreement. The supporter can only stop being a supporter by putting it in writing. So the burden's a little higher for that supporter, very flexible for decision maker. And the law protects people. If your supporter is convicted of a crime involving abuse, neglect, or exploitation, they can't be a supporter anymore. And if there's a restraining order against them on behalf of the individual, they can't be a supporter anymore. And it just recognizes that a lack of capacity could happen to any of us. And so if the supporter themselves lacks capacity, they can't continue being a supporter. And so I know we ran it right up to the very end, but I think both of us would be happy to answer questions if that's okay with Deneen, if anyone has any questions.
Sure, I think that's great. I do have a couple questions,
Yeah,
so I'll kick it off. I'm glad to hear that you have templates, and I'm hoping that everybody got the email that I sent out previous to tonight's call that had some fact sheets in it that Mandy and Johanna had wanted me to send out prior. And then I'll also send out the PowerPoint after the fact. So one of the questions I have is, who can, since you do have templates, who is there anybody that can also, if questions pop up, that can help talk about the supported decision-making plan and contract? Like,
yeah. So you're talking like somebody wants to try this out.
yes,
Yeah, and so they have questions later. Johanna, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm thinking P&A could provide some information and technical assistance on that.
As long as we're not providing the legal advice.
Right. And I
Yeah.
believe, I know for a fact, supported decision-making is one of our priorities through the end of September. And I believe it is also on our P&A priorities for the next fiscal year. So, but I don't know that we've seen the absolute final. But if you have any questions to the end of September, 100%, and I know Johanna and I would be happy to help field any questions. Like you'll have, I think, our email addresses afterwards. So we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks. And then one of my other questions was, so once you develop a plan, and then I'm just saying this in general,
Mhm.
w- is it just for the individual's file? Do they give it to the banker? Do they give it to the doctor? Do they give it to
Mm,
the fireman? Who,
Right.
I mean, how far reaching does it go with the plan?
It's a good question. So my answer to that is as far as they want it. The only caveat, like I've talked to people before where they said, like, for example, they kept it on file at the dentist's office, which is great. But because these can be changed so easily, I would just keep track of who all has the copies, because then if it changes or ends, you would want to let everyone know that that's not a good agreement anymore. It's not in effect, but you can choose to share it. Somebody said, I liked this tip. They're like, we just keep it in the glove box in the car. And then if we want to show somebody, then we can show it, or, you can let them make a copy or whatever. So I thought that was a real nice tip that I picked up along the way, but you choose if you want to share it and who you want to share it with. But I would always show it. And if you show it to somebody and they go, well, it's supported decision making, I've never heard of that. You can tell them it's in law. They have to follow it. So yeah, there's a requirement in law that nobody can just say, supported decision making, whatever. They have to honor the agreement.
Awesome, thanks.
Mhm.
Did anybody else have any questions for Johanna or Mandy? Don't be shy.
One thing that I wanted to bring up is, so we're talking to parents who have school age kids. Well, there's no age limit. So if you have a parent that you're trying to help, or I gotta do a kudos for our team. And I'm sorry, but I'm getting off a little off track. But this week I'm on call. And so I was asking the question, does this person have a guardian? We just got the papers back for supported decision making. I was so ecstatic. I wanted to call Mandy at 9 o'clock at night and go, Mandy, guess what? I just got the best, like, come back to, do you have a guardian ever? And I just think it's really important that everybody know that you can use it from 18 till whenever. And you
Yep.
don't have to start at 18. It can be 40, it can be 21, it can be 21 when they transition out of school. It could be, there's so many options for this. So
Exactly. Or you can start with a limited guardianship and then work them into supported decision making. So maybe, it's a little dicey. We're not real comfortable with full decision making, but maybe you work them into that with a limited guardianship that's in effect for a year or 2 years. And I'll just tell you, if you don't put how long it's in effect for, it'll be in effect for 5 years under North Dakota law automatically. So if you ask for guardianship, it'll just be set to expire in 5 years from the date that it's entered into. So, but you don't have to. If you go to court, you can say, you know what, let's try it for a year, judge, and let's see how it's going. And maybe we'll reevaluate.
Mandy, I got a question for you.
Mhm.
How much does guardianship cost versus how much does supported decision making cost?
Oh, that's a loaded question. So of course, if you hire a lawyer, it's going to depend on your lawyer's fees and how complicated the guardianship is, as far as how many hours of work you're paying for. The court fees are the same, whether you hire a lawyer or you don't. There is that, we think back to that medical slide, there is that self-help option. So you do not have to have a lawyer to get guardianship. And that's why the self-help site was created. So you can go onto that site, you can learn more. You still have to follow the same procedure that a lawyer would follow. You still have to pay the court fees that a lawyer would pay, but there's some instructions and they're written in less legalese than normal. Like it's pretty accessible language to help you do that. So if you're looking at that, just so you know, you're not limited to lawyer going bankrupt or nothing. There is a way to do it. So that would be your cheaper option. Supported decision making is pretty much free as far as I can tell. I'm not aware of any costs on that. It's just the cost of your printer if you're printing out some paper or something like that. Good question.
You want me to read it, Mandy?
Yes,
In case
please.
somebody else has a question. Becky said that, thank you for the comment about the age, who can use this. My son is 30, I do not have guardianship. I've been looking for someone that can help him more than just his staff, but isn't me. Just recently, he has stated he knows he needs to be more independent because mom, will not be around forever. This is a great option that I didn't know was available.
Yes, and so I'm glad you made that comment because Johanna and I, we have other advocates around the state that have been doing this training too, and we've been approached by a handful of parents of adult children who, at the time when they became guardians for their children, supported decision making wasn't in North Dakota law, so it wasn't an option, and special educators, maybe that was the only option anyone was aware of, right? And so they became guardians of their kids. And I've had a handful of parents come up to us and go, you know what, we didn't know about this. And now that we do, I don't think I need to be guardian for my kid anymore. And some of them have been aging parents where that was a concern. Like, I think my kid can handle this. I'm still young enough and capable enough to watch it play out and see how that works. And some of them have been younger parents where they were like, I never really thought I needed to be guardian, but I didn't know what else to do. And so we've had some really awesome opportunities to chat with people about how this might work for them and how they're going to use it. So yeah, I get really excited too.
And just because the old adage is it's always been done this way, always guardianship, does not mean that it's the right way to go for everybody that's seeking a little bit more assistance in making decisions.
Right. And if you hear it, special education, just throw this out there. When your child turns 18, that you all of a sudden won't be allowed to come to meetings anymore. If your child invites you to those meetings, you get to come. If your child authorizes you to do stuff, you get to come because your child's that legal decision maker now, right? So just, to kind of dispel that the door is going to slam in your face and lock behind you, just explore your options and do what's right for your kid and for you. And no matter how old your kid is, I've used supported decision-making informally with my grandfather, who's in his early 90s, when he was in the hospital and broke a hip, and allowed me online access to his medical records. And, he had surgery and his mental capacity was knocked back from that anesthesia. And so he was confused what they were telling him, all this different stuff and procedures. I explained it to him. You know what? About 5 months after that, he was discharged home finally, and his capacity is super close to where it used to be, and he's living independently now. So again, that just gives proof to capacity is a moment in time. Was his capacity diminished? Absolutely. Was I scared it was permanently? Sure, I was. Did I feel slightly uncomfortable with him making his own decisions? Heck yeah. but I supported him, and it worked out well. But if it hadn't, there's other options that I could have pursued. So I'm glad that we chose to go less restrictive in that case. That was a success in our family, my personal experience.
That's awesome, Mandy.
Yeah.
Did anybody else have any questions at all or comments? You have to take yourself off mute. I am going to put in a little bit of a plug, and while people are thinking about a question, Family Voices just developed a transition curriculum that's there for youth as well as families. So if that's of interest to you, make sure you let us know, and we can look at a possible training in the area of which you live. Vicky's also been looking at possibly doing it by Zoom. However, it's probably about a 4-hour training, so it would be a little bit harder via Zoom. So in person would be okay. And then I also wanted to mention to all of you as well is that we have a transition care notebook on our website, which is www.fvnd.org. So Family Voices North Dakota abbreviated. And in that, the whole purpose of that was to help your youth as they're transitioning into adulthood, document who their providers are, so that when you're looking at supported decision making as well, maybe there are some of those that are going to be listed in that transition notebook that could be awesome supporters for your youth. So I wanted to make sure to mention that as well. The Koenig said this was so helpful. I definitely would like to share the recording with a couple of my colleagues. So Mandy, if that's okay with you, we'll also do that. Did anybody else have any comments at all before we end for the evening? I want to thank Johanna and Mandy for sure for agreeing to do this. I learned something every time I check on supported decision making. So I just wanted to throw that out there on how important this issue is for many of our families that are transitioning into adulthood and for the providers who are serving them, because I think it's new information that not everybody is used to. So I think it's just wonderful. And Becca says, thank you. So one last call for any questions or comments. Joan says, thank you also. Okay, since there's no questions, we're going to end for the evening. And I just want to thank you both again for joining us. And if you think of anything else that that P&A would like to do an extended learning call to get some information out there, maybe even it's voting, I don't know, whatever the new priorities are going to be, just let us know and we can do that. So thanks everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you for
Goodbye.
having us.
Yeah.
Bye.